2026 National University Speaker Series. My name is Dr. Nancy Rohland-Heinrich, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Vice President of Community Engagement for National University. I am proud to be the founder and host of our NU Speaker Series, and since the inception of the Speaker Series in July of 2020, we have held nearly 70 episodes, and we've had such an impressive group of presenters on very diverse topics. Please note that all of our past webinars have been recorded, and we will post a link in the chat should you want to listen to some of our prior episodes. We truly appreciate all of you that are joining us today, whether it's your first time as a participant or whether you're a regular follower of the NU Speaker Series. In our audience today, we certainly want to welcome any alumni members, current students, faculty, staff, and of course, community members. And as you can see, National University really prides itself on being in and of the community, and we appreciate our virtual audience joining us today from throughout California, the country, and abroad. So welcome. We hope this next hour will be a notable learning experience with our speaker. But before we get started, let me take just a brief moment to share a few things about National University. We were founded in 1971, and in November, we'll be celebrating our 55th anniversary. Our founder was a retired U.S. Navy captain, Dr. David Chagos, and to this day, nearly 50% of our undergraduate students are military affiliated. So we're really proud of our roots in that area. And the university has always had a very rich history since our inception of providing accessible and relevant higher education opportunities to meet the needs of non-traditional working and military students. Today, we provide more than 125 degree programs at the undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral level. We're serving more than 50,000 academic students per year, and we consider ourselves to be difference makers, educating difference makers, and are very proud to have an alumni spanning 255,000 today in a very wonderful global network with thousands of distinguished alumni. But now it's time to introduce today's speaker and our topic. And I know that you're all joining us today because you want to find out more about why it takes more than a title to make you a leader. And today's speaker is Dr. Laurie Hillstock, who is an educator, strategist, and consultant. She has an extensive career spanning many different areas and organizations, from workforce development, organizational growth, strategic planning, and digital learning innovation. She received her undergraduate degree in English, two master's degrees in human resource development, as well as an MBA, and earned her PhD in educational leadership from Clemson University. Dr. Hillstock has a very impressive background and credentials, and please explore her full bio online. For our audience, please note that following today's presentation, we will have a Q&A. And I am very pleased to share that today's moderator for our Q&A will be Joe Patterson, who is a senior administrator at National University and serves as the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and National Outreach. So please feel free to submit any questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A, and we will address those afterwards in the moderated discussion. But without further ado, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Laurie Hillstock, as she shares her tremendous insights on how it takes more than a title to make you a leader. Laurie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Wow. The number of people in this session tells me one thing: leadership matters. It matters to you, and it matters in the environment you are a part of every single day. But before we jump in, I want to focus us on one idea that will guide our entire conversation. Leadership is not about a title or a position. I believe it's more about a pattern of behavior and how we show up every single day is what people remember and connect with. So let me give you an example. Early in my career, my very first true leadership title sounded pretty good. But the truth is, the title itself didn't make me a leader at all. The way I engaged with others and handled situations did. Sometimes I got it right, but to be honest, most of the time I didn't. But those moments taught me what leadership truly looks like in practice. And candidly, I learned some of the biggest leadership lessons the hard way. So, our goal today is pretty straightforward. We're going to have some real talk about leadership, not titles. And the plan is to lead with practical strategies we can start using today, not next year, not 6 months from now, not yet after another session, but beginning this week, like today. So, are you ready? If you're ready, just use your reaction tool and give me a thumbs up, or better yet, I can also see the chat. You can give me a yes in the chat and we can go ahead and get started. Awesome, awesome. Just going to pull up my screen real quick. Thank you, thank you. So let's take probably about 10 seconds, right? In the chat, type one word, not 3 or 5, but one word that describes what you want people to experience or feel when you walk into a room or when they interact with you. And I'm just going to hold for a second. Just one word. Seen. Yeah, trust. Effective, authentic, empathy. Wow, comfort. I love these. I love these words. Respected, excitement. I love all of these. And what you're sharing right now is, to me, exactly what leadership looks like in practice. See, all of these things are about a pattern of behavior, which leads to the experience people have with us. So what I want you to do is remember that one word. Write it down if you need to. Just write it on a piece of paper, because we're going to come back to it. Every single thing we're going to talk about today is going to be about closing the gap. Now, what am I talking about? See, what you've just given me is the one word that describes how you want people to experience you and interact with you. But then there's another level of how we actually show up and what actually happens. And we're going to deal with the gap in between and how to close that. Okay? So just think about that one word. Overall, here's the main idea. How we show up matters. Now, a mentor said those words to me many years ago, and I personally have never forgotten them. In fact, I lead with them in just about every single leadership conversation I have. People get tired of me saying it. But here's the point. I believe that titles, they do say one thing. And in a lot of ways, they're important because they're really about expectation. But I also believe that our behaviors say everything. People notice our title, no doubt, but they will remember how we showed up or how we handled things. I appreciate that. Amen. They really do appreciate how we handle things, especially when things get stressful or when we're tired or just worn out. Or guess what? Or just in how we interact with people every single day. And I believe that is where we build trust and credibility. And honestly, for me, that's where leadership shows up the most. Now, I personally see this a lot in my work in Hillstock Consulting. Teams will say they're stuck because of process or a system or sometimes something else. And a lot of times that's true. But when we dig in deep, we almost always find that one real issue is how people are showing up, meaning, how are they talking to or at each other? What are they assuming? Or how clear they're being in their communication overall? And what we found is that when people change their behavior, or rather how they show up, the work moves forward. Even if it's hard, even if it's a tough situation, the conversations really become a lot easier and people become more open and connected. So, thinking about that, let's just do a quick check, right? Right here in the room, here's a quick poll. Which matters more in your environment, title or behavior? Go ahead and answer that question. I'm going to hold for a few seconds. Which matters more in your environment, title or behavior? Polls on the screen. And in just a few seconds, our hosts there are going to close the poll. We're going to see what the results are. Look at that. 98% of you said behavior. Thank you for your responses. And they are so telling. Honestly, your answers line up with what I see every time I talk about leadership. Behavior matters. So let's take a few minutes to talk about a few behaviors that people can actually connect with. And here are 4 on the screen. And I'm going to take a minute just to give a quick overview of each, right? So we look at presence. When we are fully engaged, people don't have to fight for our attention. Then we think about curiosity. I think this speaks to how we understand what's really going on instead of assuming or jumping to conclusions. And then we think about kindness and care. Now, for me, this is really about the human side of things, being respectful and treating people like they really do matter. And then the last one I want us to touch on today is going to be around stability. Sometimes it's not what we say, but how we say it. So this is really about tone and our approach, especially in very stressful situations, right? So I believe each of these behaviors shape how we show up, and together they form the foundation of really good leadership. So let's take a few minutes to talk about each one in a little more detail. Let's start with presence. To me, presence is the choice we make to give someone our full attention. Now, let me ask you this question. And you can give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, reaction, and whatever. Have you ever tried to share a concern with someone in a leadership position while they were checking their email or messing with their phone or rustling papers somewhere? Have you ever done that? Look at all those reactions. Yeah. And so they're doing all of that instead of looking at you directly and paying attention. Now, here's the question. Do you remember how that feels? Candidly, people are starving for leaders who actually are in the moment. And in my experiences, most don't want leaders multitasking, rushing, or half listening while they're thinking about their next thing. So to me, our presence communicates respect. When we are fully present, people feel valued and seen, and they connect, which are some of the exact words you guys gave me a few minutes ago when you entered the one word. Now, I saw this with a team I worked with. They kept sort of missing each other. They definitely had the right skill set. It wasn't about skills. Half of them were really stellar at what they did, but they were all sort of half present with each other. They were constantly multitasking in meetings, not really listening, rushing through decisions because, hey, I got to get to the next thing, or assuming understanding. So when we got everyone to push away their phones and their laptops, we even took the clock out of the space, got them to really focus on the same conversation until it was finished. Things changed almost immediately. People listened and collaboration just naturally improved. So, a couple of very simple practices, and some of y'all are going to laugh at me when I put this up, but I'm telling you, I want you to really try this. And like I said at the beginning of this, I learned some leadership lessons the hard way. All right. So take my word for it on this. One of them is the 90-second rule. Give someone literally 90 seconds of your full undivided attention today. Now, some of you are sitting there saying, what's 90 seconds going to do? I'm asking you to start with 90 seconds, and eventually it's going to grow to be more than that. That is, during that time period, no multitasking, no emails, no phone, no rushing, no any of that stuff. Just be present and really stop and listen. And the second one is, before you respond in the next meeting to whatever's been said, take a pause for one breath. One breath. It's amazing how much clarity and calmness that tiny little pause can create. And while you're at it, consider this. As the leader, do you really have to give an immediate answer? Or can you take a moment to reflect before you respond? Now, and then when you respond, try to make eye contact with the person or the group, even if it's in camera, right? And use the person's name. So I'm going to ask you to do this with me, right? I'm looking right at you and you're looking at me. Drop one word in the chat. Think about this question. What gets in the way of presence for you? What gets in the way and keeps you from being present when you need to be? Just one word. Drop that one word in the chat. Busy. Phones. Look at that. Multitasking. Kids. Thoughts. Emails. What about the clock? There you go. Time. Look at that. All these thoughts are coming through. Fatigue, right? We get so tired. We're like, what in the world? So, again, a lot of the same themes, and they're still coming through. Look at what you guys are saying. Distractions, multitasking, stress, time pressures. These are real things, and we need to acknowledge them, not run away from them, because this is exactly why presence is a leadership behavior. It's a choice we make in the moment, which has absolutely nothing to do with title. I'm just going to choose to push all that to the side and give you my undivided attention. And my challenge to you is to try it for 90 seconds with someone. Okay. So let's move on to curiosity, right? I like to think of curiosity as being the antidote to defensiveness and miscommunication. Yeah, I said that on a recorded line. There is a such thing as defensiveness when it comes to us as leaders, and a lot of times we do miscommunicate. But if curiosity is done well, it helps us to understand instead of assume. And believe it or not, I think it can build trust quickly and support collaboration. Now, let me give you an example. Okay. I saw this with a cross-functional team I work with. They were just not in a good place. They were used to working in silos, and sort of each group was assuming the absolute worst about each other. Has anyone ever experienced that one? I smile because I know I'm getting ready to get a lot of yeses. Look at that. They're coming through in the chat. Well, once we introduced what we call curiosity-based questions with the right tone, right? Tone matters. Things like, help me understand the real issue from your perspective. Some of that tension went away, and people stopped just reacting to each other and thinking the worst of each other and really started to listen. And like I said, solutions and collaboration started to happen. So here's a practice, right? Try to use curiosity questions with someone, right? Especially if you're bothered or have some negative thought towards them. Slow down, watch your tone, and instead of sort of doing it in an angry way, literally say to them, help me understand. Be as sincere as possible. What am I missing? Or can you tell me more about how you're seeing this? Or better yet, what does success look like from your viewpoint? Um, I even had somebody ask this question to me, and it felt really good. What feels most challenging about this right now? And it made me stop and think, and it made them stop and think, and we really started to listen because curiosity pushes us to listen more deeply, which then leads to deeper engagement. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment, literally take a moment. No chat, no poll, no reactions, right? I want you to take a moment just to reflect. All right? Don't respond in the chat. No interaction. Just think of a recent misunderstanding that you observed or were a part of. And I want you to consider how curiosity might have changed the outcome. And I am literally on a live session going to not say anything. I'm literally going to hold for about 20 seconds because I believe reflection is just that important. And I'm going to give you 20 seconds just to reflect. All right. Thank you for allowing that time. That's hard to do because we're always looking at the clock. We're always rushing. But reflection's important. And keep in mind that in stressful moments, curiosity can really be the difference between defensiveness and true understanding. So let's take a look at kindness and care. Now, this really isn't about being nice. Not really. It's about being honest and supportive at the same time. Now, I'll tell you a little story. I remember being asked once, do you want people to like you or fear you? I didn't like that question. And it was a trick question. And I didn't give the response that the person expected me to give. I said neither. I, it'd be nice if people like me, but I already know that they're not going to like half the decisions that I make because as a leader, you can't make everybody happy all the time. And I definitely don't want anybody to be afraid because they're not going to do their work well. So I said neither. For me, the goal has always been about respect. Okay. I believe if you can respect the decision, then you know it comes from a good place. You don't have to like it, but you can respect it and then you can honor it. Okay. So, and I believe that respect comes from a balance of honesty with care. And let's explore that a little bit more. I think kindness itself without honesty really just leaves people guessing, like they don't really know what the expectation is. And I also believe that honesty without care can feel really harsh, like we can come across as being too direct. So I believe that it, uh, people want both. And I can appreciate your note there, Cynthia, about empathy as well. So, for example, uh, I think a lot of people want to know truth and they want to know you still support them. And I think empathy plays into that. Now, I had moments in my own career where I had to deliver some very tough feedback or make a really hard call. Now, this is truly me telling on myself because when I was kind and not fully honest, people didn't understand my expectation at all. But when I was honest, without any level of care, I came across as really direct. And I hurt feelings, and I damaged relationships, and I damaged the efforts of the team. Very real situations. But over time, I learned to approach things with both honesty and care. And when I did that, my relationships became stronger and the expectations became much more clear because the person or the group knew exactly where they stood and that I wanted them to succeed. So, um, here's a pretty straightforward practice that you can try. Ask these questions or say something like this. You know, I care about your success, so I want to be honest with you. If you lead with that, it starts to identify our intention and really reduce some defensiveness. Or here's what I'm seeing. That really focuses on actual behavior that's observed in the team, and it gets rid of personality situations. Or here's what I need going forward. Gives a clear path and expectation. So it's the balance that I've found that people appreciate more. So I'm going to come back to you. Quick moment, very quick moment. Just use the reaction tool. Just give me a thumbs up if you've ever wished someone would have been both kind and clear with you. Both kind and clear. Look at all those reactions, right? Seeing all those reactions reminds me that we've all been on the receiving end of this. And it's also a great reminder that how we show up truly shapes someone's experience. And that's invaluable. So our last thought here in terms of behavior is stability. And I'm going to be honest, this one may hit the hardest because people really want leadership that doesn't add to the chaos or cause problems, right? Instead, most of us want someone who can stay calm when things get tense or stressful and help the team work together to get through the situation in a really good way. So, to me, stability is about how we respond, not react. Now, I'm going to give you a personal example. And yeah, I know this is being recorded, but I'm a human being too. And I told y'all I learned some lessons the hard way. So here's the deal. Growing through these situations have helped me become a better leader. So here goes. In the past, when something hit me the wrong way in a meeting, I would react very quickly, pretty sharply and directly without any pause whatsoever. And I wasn't concerned about tone or body language. I just laid it out there. And that was my default. Over time, I'd like to say I might have grown up a bit. So, for instance, more recently, in more recent years, and this actually happened not too long ago, I had a moment where someone said something that definitely could have triggered the old version of me. And I felt it all just bubbling up, man. It was ready to just come right out. But here's the part I'm most proud of. I caught myself. I caught myself. Instead of reacting, I took a deep breath. Actually, in this moment, I took about 5. And I got to tell y'all, I'm from the South. So I put on my virtual pearls and then I chose my response. In my mind, all of this took a long time, but in reality, it probably took about 10 seconds, if that. Now, I want to be clear. I was still very clear in my communication, but my tone was balanced and I was focused, and I didn't let the moment pull a reaction out of me. Instead, I responded pretty calmly and professionally. And that's what stability looks like for me right now. I'm far from perfection. Don't claim that at all. Just growth and making a conscious choice not to add to the chaos by damaging relationships or causing gossip and all this other kind of stuff. So, here's a practice. You know, call it a 10-second reset. Before you share anything in a tense moment, pause. Take a pause. Notice what you're feeling in the moment. Breathe. If you have to step away, just say, hey, I just need a moment and I'll come back to that. Or I've even done this in meetings before. Just give me 30 seconds. Give me about 30 seconds and I'll just sit there and think about it. And in that moment, you might need to put your virtual pearls on, but then after all of that, respond. Now, those few seconds, they don't fix everything, but they do keep us from adding to the problem. And that's what people remember. Remember, it's a behavior. So, quick reflective moment. No chat, no interaction, no polling. Just think about this. Pure reflection. Take about 20 seconds, and I'm going to hold again. Think back to a very tense situation that you were a part of or observed. Where could a 10-second reset have changed the entire conversation or even how you showed up? And I'm going to hold for 20 seconds. Thank you for allowing this hold. Thank you for allowing yourself time to reflect. And for me, that's what stability is, pearls and all. And the beautiful thing is this: you don't need a title to lead with that kind of presence. Because the truth is, leadership shows up long before the title does. So let's talk about leading without a title. My last big point. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about leadership, in my opinion, is that it's tied to a position. But we can lead from behind, the middle, or even in the front. And honestly, some of the strongest leadership I have personally ever experienced came from people who didn't have positional authority at all. They had built enough credibility and trust to influence outcomes. And let's just be real, that type of influence does not come from a title. So let me give you another quick example from early in my career. Okay. I didn't have a big role or a fancy title, but sometimes I did have a seat at the table. So I listened carefully and I tried to choose the right moment to speak. See, I was a little bit different than a lot of people in the room. I actually read the whole agenda before the meeting and I thought about things. So when I did speak, I was intentional about keeping my words, keeping things very, very simple and clear. I didn't use a lot of jargon. And I tried to bring in data to back up my thoughts and suggestions. And because of that, over time, people, even senior leaders, started coming to me for direction. Charge. And that's when I learned something really, really important. You don't need a title to lead. You just need behaviors people can trust. And I listened and I learned. And look, I didn't know everything, I didn't always have the answer, and I was honest about that. And sometimes I had to go look things up or call a colleague for support. All very simple stuff, but powerful. And before I realized it, I had real influence. So here's the practice strategy, right? We need a strategy behind this. Try to go into conversations with these questions in mind, because I think it can change us from participating in something to actually leading, no matter where you sit. So sort of ask yourself, what outcome do I want or need? Or what does the group need from me? And how can I show up to support all of those outcomes? So to me, these questions may help you walk into the room with intentionality instead of just showing up and hoping for the best, right? So quick engagement moment, very quick, very quick. Drop the word influence in the chat if you've ever led something without a title or observed somebody doing it. Look at that. There it goes. There it goes. So you can appreciate influence. Loving it, loving it, loving it. So we're rearing here to a close, and we've talked about presence and curiosity and kindness and care and stability. And we've also talked about influence. And all of these are leadership behaviors that shape something bigger. But years ago, I had a mentor ask me a question that stopped me in my tracks. She said, Laurie, what is your leadership signature? Now, I want y'all to hear this one. Okay. What is your leadership signature? And I thought, what the heck is she talking about? I had no idea what she meant. Then she explained that your leadership signature is the emotional footprint you leave behind after every interaction, whether it's a meeting, a phone call, an email, a chat, a video session, all of that stuff. And it hit me. I actually have the power to shape that. I can be intentional about the experience people have when I show up. And that's why I wear this wristband. Okay. It says how we show up matters. My entire team wears them, and we even give them out in our sessions to anyone who wants them, because for us, it's not just a phrase, it's a practice. So let me ask you a few reflective questions. Just reflect. I'm not going to hold 20 seconds on this. What do people actually experience when you walk into a room? What do you want them to experience? What do they actually experience? What do you want them to experience? And what is one way you can close the gap? Now let that sit for a few seconds, because this is bringing us full circle, right? Remember the one word we talked about at the very beginning of this. So here is the practice. And it's more of a leadership challenge for this week. All right. I want you to consider 24-hour leadership reset. And like I said, this is going to bring us full circle. I want you to look back at those 4 behaviors: presence, curiosity, kindness and care, stability. And in the next 24 hours, I want you to choose one behavior, not 5, not 4, not 3, not 2, but one that you will be intentional about to practice this week. And let's go back to the very beginning of the session, when each of us chose one word to describe the experience we want people to have when we show up. That one word represents who we want to be. But again, there's often a gap between how we actually show up and the way we want to be, and we need to be intentional about closing that gap. And for me, that gap is where leadership lives. So the challenge for each of us is to choose the one behavior that will move us closest to that one word we chose at the beginning of this session. And that's our reset. Practice it, reflect on it, and watch how things begin to change in you and around you. So I think in this moment, we've covered a lot today. And before we wrap up, I'm just going to open the floor for some questions. And um, see what everybody has on their mind. So, Joe, I'm going to pitch it back to you and let's see what questions we have.
Great. Thanks, Laurie. Awesome session. Really appreciate the time. Appreciate everyone's energy and comments and insights in the chat. So, one thing that we're seeing that maybe if you could talk a little bit more about is how do you view leading with vulnerability? Like how do you use the word vulnerability in this kind of framework that you
Yeah.
set up?
Yeah, it's very real. And for me, it is understanding who we are as individuals before I can lead somebody else, I have to know who I am. And that is what vulnerability speaks to, right? I have to be willing to say that as a leader, I don't know everything, nor should I be expected to know everything, right? That's why you're there. So being vulnerable to me speaks to, I say this to people all the time. I love being surrounded by people who are smarter than me, right? Who have better skill sets because it helps me grow. If I knew and could do everything, I don't need a team. And they don't, and the team doesn't need a leader. So being vulnerable is accepting that I have strengths where others have weaknesses and they have strengths where I have weaknesses. And for that to happen, I have to know who I am.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, at National University, one of our ways of work is to build trust. And I think that those resets are important in those leadership conversations because something that we like to use even inside the school is I'd like to build trust with you right now. So
Mhm.
even that one little phrase, gives a quick little 2-3 second reset for both people that are involved in that conversation. It allows people to be vulnerable, maybe relax a little bit, take a deep breath. So we've been able to use that, I think, in a lot of our workings inside the university as well.
Yeah.
There's another. Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to add one note. Sometimes, I'll be very honest about this. I was taught intentionally when I went into leadership roles to the concept of never let them see you sweat, right? And so that meant that I couldn't be vulnerable. And I realized over time that just wasn't working. That wasn't working. So when I started to own, I really don't know and I need help, man, everything changed for me. So I think that's something culture plays into that, environment plays into that. But I agree with what you said, Joe. I appreciate your additional comments there.
Great, thanks. So there's an interesting topic coming up in the Q&A
Hmm.
about how do you share feedback or coaching up to a leader. So if you're working with a leader who is frequently defensive and you're having issues, having an authentic conversation when you're not the one that's in the position of power, what kinds of coachings could you provide up, I guess, managing up in that situation?
Um, I will say this for me, I've done it as an employee and I do it a lot as a consultant. So I've done it on both sides of it. What I personally have found successful is to take them offsite. Don't do it where everybody can see you having that conversation. That's a whole separate situation. Um, go to lunch, take a walk, whatever it is, and then just ask, Joe, can I be honest with you? Or Joe, there's something I really want to share with you because I want to see you be successful or I want to see you be more successful. Approach it that way because then the walls come down. Now, does it work 100% of the time? No, because sometimes as leaders, we're just closed minded. And I'm saying that for real, right? And so if they're not ready for it, you can't go there. But sometimes when they're ready, take them off site, have an honest conversation, just be a human being.
Great. Thank you for that. We have some other questions about striking the balance between being empathetic and direct. You mentioned it a little bit in your
Yeah.
presentation. Do you have some tools there? Do you have some tips that you want to dive a little bit deeper on?
For me, it became a lot about tone, right? As I said to you, I learned these things the hard way. I'd go in a room and I just light people up. And it wasn't a good situation at all. And I learned that I could be really very honest with people if I watched my tone. And I set an expectation. Here's the path forward, right? I would say things like, Joe, wow. And a lot of people will tell you use the sandwich. Well, they'll say something positive, then something negative, then something positive. And that works sometimes, but in my experience, it doesn't always work. So I would literally go in and say, hey, Joe, look, there's something I think we need to talk about. Um, this is how I perceive that. Tell me your story. Right. Here's my story. Tell me your story because both can be true. And then I can accept your story. Now let's talk about how we can move forward together. And to me that that takes all of that negative tone out of it. That takes all of that defensiveness away.
Great, thanks. You talked a lot about things you can do, strategies you can do to kind of reset a conversation. A couple times, I think you mentioned it's okay to just say, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe taking a break.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other ideas or tools that you can use when an interaction is maybe turning hostile or a little bit
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, especially if you're the one that's not in the position of power or if you're not in the
Yeah.
management position in that interaction?
Yeah. Um, okay, so candidly, sometimes you can't change the conversation. You have to sit through it, right? And sometimes it's just best not to say anything. All right. But sometimes it's best to, a lot of times we go to meetings with laptops and phones and all that kind of stuff. I personally take notes that way. When I've seen conversations that way, I close my laptop, I lean in and I look at the person and I listen, right? When we start, our body language says a lot. So we have to be careful about that. When we start folding our arms and we start doing stuff like this and we start doing this, all that's just adding to the problem. But when we can just stop and lean in and start looking like we're really engaging and listening, that takes some of the tone out, right? So, yeah, you may not be ready to have the conversation, which means you don't necessarily have to respond, other than, I see your point. I understand that. But change the body as well.
Yeah, great. There's an interesting kind of trend coming up in the Q&A. A lot of it is leading and influencing without authority. That's
Mm-hmm.
the topics you mentioned quite a bit on.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the other uh, tone or kind of messaging in the Q&A is when you're leading without authority, you're often asked to do things that are far above your position. So how do you balance kind of taking a leadership role and then not being, I guess, taken advantage of or always viewed as like you're the leader from the middle, but you never get the
Mm-hmm.
reward, right? So, if that makes sense.
I've been in that space. I can tell you more times than I can count. And initially, I was so overwhelmed because I was afraid. I was saying yes to everything. Sure, I can do it. And then I realized, wait a minute. No, may not be the answer you want to hear, and it may not be the answer I want to give, but it's a perfectly acceptable answer, right? So I have been in places where I've said, thank you for asking me that. Thank you for trusting me with that. But right now, I can't balance it. And I want to do a good job with that, and I can't balance it. So you can offload me here, or I'm going to have to step away. Doesn't mean I don't support you. I just can't do it right now in the moment.
Excellent. So I think, do you have any other kind of tools or tips about, you've mentioned a lot of, well, like I said, the trends in the Q&A are from a lot of people who may not be in the management position during these
Mm-hmm.
interactions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have other tips or tools when you are dealing with maybe a room full of people with the quote unquote big titles and you're not in that boat? Anything that you think kind of helps frame, I guess, instill confidence, portray power, and create kind of a framework for you to dive into and be a leader in those situations where you're title wise, where you're much lower on the org chart.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, you know, part of my career was I was that very person, right? I didn't have the title. I just got in the room somehow. Um, I made sure that when I did speak, it was effective, meaning, and I didn't take up 20 minutes saying something, 2 to 3 minutes, and it was an intentional insert. But I also knew sometimes the combination of people that were going to be in the room. And mentorship is very important, right? So there's a lot of politics that takes place that's unspoken just because of the combination of people in the room. So if there was a trusted colleague there with a much higher title, I may have gone to them to get some feedback and insight to say, but this is what I'm thinking. Can you give me a cue as to when you think would be the best time for me to share it? That's happened to me before, and that worked out very, very well. I've seen that we've done that a lot through our consulting firm. We've asked people to do just those kinds of things. The other thing is, what we've learned, it still happens today. I do a lot of consulting with different groups, and people see the agenda, but they skim it. They really don't know what's on the agenda, right? They haven't really thought about what's there. Well, you're that person that can think about it, right? And you can be intentional so that when you do speak, make sure whatever you're saying aligns with what's being talked about in that moment. And you don't have to speak on every agenda item. right? The meeting takes place every Friday. You might say something every other Friday. It's a slow piece, but you're gaining respect.
How do you think a leader makes mistakes when they are always needing to be right? I mean, I think if a lot of the points that you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
the subtext is that everyone thinks they need to be right at all times. And when you can lose
Yeah.
that, what does that do for a leader?
You know, um, you're not, you're just not right all the time, right? And so when a leader realizes when they can get rid of the idea of, I don't have to be right, they become more open-minded. And it reminds me a lot of conscious leadership with Jim Detmer, right? He talks about the line, being above and below the line. And when you're above the line, you don't have the need to be right. You're open to learning and growth and development. But when you're below the line, you have the need to be right. You're very closed-minded. And so we do this all day long. He talks about that we go up and down only, right? And so when we as leaders can recognize that's what we're going through, but this goes back to vulnerability that we started out this conversation with, right? Some leaders are just not vulnerable, and okay, at the end of the day, we're not there to fix everybody, right? People have to be open to it. And so sometimes you just have a tough situation, but when you see that little door crack a little bit, sometimes it's slow tiptoeing right through it. And when we can lose the need to be right, we can really grow our teams.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we have about 2 minutes left. If there's any kind of last minute questions or topics before we need to turn it over to Dr. Nancy Rohland in just a moment. We did have questions in the Q&A and in the chat about the book that you just mentioned. Do you have the title that you?
Yeah, it's literally called Conscious Leadership. And if you give me a minute,
Sure.
I'll look it up with them. In fact, I'm just going to send you the link. I'm going to post in the chat the link to the website, and you'll see all of their videos and the book and all that great stuff. I just put that in the chat for everybody. It is absolutely awesome. I think you'll enjoy it. And it really pushes people to deal with things. We use it a lot when we're doing leadership development with folks. So thank you for that. And I will say this: I've shared my contact information here on screen because as I want to encourage people as you reflect on this session and try out some of the strategies I've talked about, I want you to, if you feel like sharing, send me a note, give me an update. I want to hear from you. Let me notice. Let me know what's working for you and what's not. Right. Again, we're all still growing and learning. Right. So I'd like to know what strategy you tried and how well that worked for you.
Yeah, and I think what I didn't mention, and I think it's obvious to most people in the session, what you're talking about doesn't just apply to your professional life. I'm about to go practice some of these things in my personal life this evening. So, thanks for the tips. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, but I think this wraps up the Q&A portion. I think we're going to turn it back over to Nancy Rohland. Thank you so much, Laurie, for all of your insights and your energy. A lot of comments about your relatability and your just how authentic you are. And so we really appreciate your time and going to turn it back over to Nancy.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lori and Joe. Lori, you can stay on camera if you'd like. So I just want to extend my appreciation to Lisa Harris, who referred you to us. And what a great selection for our speaker series. We've had a few topics with similar titles, but your approach, your insight, your valuable lessons and teaching moments, I think, really resonated with all of our audience. So I think everyone had an opportunity to learn. I do agree that this would apply to your professional life as well as personal life. I was thinking about relationship as a parent, all sorts of things. But, just really helpful, and I really appreciated your approach. So thank you so much, Dr. Hillstock and Joe Patterson. Truly appreciated you serving as the moderator. I can tell that you enjoyed it, and we're always glad to give that opportunity to one of our NU administrators. So I want to just share a few things about some upcoming events that we're going to have affiliated with National University and our Alumni Association, the legal side of AI in the workplace, coming up this week on June 17th. Next week, we have an opportunity for all of you to get to know other NU alum or students with Navigator Networking. Alumni Association meeting as well next week. And then for those of you that are in the San Diego area, we would love to have you join us for a summer social at Carl Strauss Brewing in the Sorrento Valley area. That will take place on June 29th. And then also June 30th, we have a career transition seminar hosted by Blair Search Partners at our Scripps Ranch location. And I would like to mention we also have a fabulous speaker series coming up on July 14th with Dr. Lee Rice. So we'll be sending out more information on that as well. I'd like to thank Heather and Lindsay and Diane because there's a lot of preparation and coordination to make our speaker series successful. And it's wonderful speakers and topics like the one we had today that really adds a lot of value to the personal and professional lives of all our listeners. So thank you so much, Laurie Hillstock. Really appreciate you. Thanks, Joe. And thank you to our audience. I hope you learned a lot. Appreciate all of you.